Globalization is the most powerful force for change in the world today, affecting not only remote populations like the Ladakhis, but societies across the planet. For some people, globalizing economic activity is our biggest hope for the future, the solution to world poverty in particular. For others, it's a fundamental cause of many of the problems we face today, and an ongoing threat.
People often think of globalization as something that brings us all closer together through faster communications, easier travel and so on. But at its core, it's an economic process. It's about deregulation. And that means freeing up big banks and big businesses to enter local markets worldwide. The focus is on profit, not people. That doesn't bring us together. On the contrary, it's leading to increased competition and division.
Globalization is the rapid expansion of a process that started about 500 years ago. At that time, Europeans conquered and colonized much of the world. They dismantled self-reliant economies and enslaved their populations, forcing them to work in mines, cotton fields and tea plantations. In the mid-20th century, colonialism gave way to a more subtle form of enslavement: debt. Shackled by so-called aid packages and crippling loans, nation after nation fell deeper into poverty, making it easier for corporations and financial institutions, the successors of the colonial merchants, to extract money, resources and cheap labor. Today, those transnational businesses have grown so large and powerful that they effectively control governments, dictate economic policy, and shape people's opinions and worldviews. Yet the push for growth through global trade in both goods and finance continues. In order to compete, the big corporations are demanding ever more deregulation, still further globalization. It's an agenda that has major implications for both ecosystems and people around the world.
It's hard to get your head around globalization. It's tempting to ignore it, to leave it to the experts. But we simply can't afford to. Even though it's something that happens out there, it has a profound effect on every aspect of our lives, even our sense of self.
All the time we're exposed to images of a certain level of material success, a certain level of looks, a certain lifestyle that we're kind of measuring ourselves up to and seeing ourselves not as good as.
There is a constant pressure on people to have bigger, better, more. But of course, in the end, what does it bring us? It doesn't bring us happiness. Material reward has never brought us happiness.
Every year since the end of World War II, one of the big polling firms has asked Americans, "Are you happy with your life?" The number of Americans who say, "Yes, I'm very happy with my life," the percentage, peaks in 1956 and goes slowly but steadily downhill ever since. That's interesting, because in that same 50 years we've gotten immeasurably richer. We have 3 times as much stuff. Somehow it hasn't worked, because that same affluence tends to undermine community.
Our children don't want to speak their languages anymore. They no longer want to be associated with their own culture. It's cool to wear designer jeans. It's cool to eat at McDonald's.
O sea, los niños tenían ese rechazo a la cultura desde la escuela, ¿no? ¿Por qué? Porque el profesor era así. Porque el profesor le dice, a ver, si tú no aprendes a multiplicar, entonces te vas a ir a pastear chanchos. Si no aprendes a multiplicar, entonces te vas a ir a rascar la tierra como tu padre. Como si rascar la tierra fuera a ser delito o algo pecaminoso, algo malo.
In a previous era, before the modern era of consumer capitalism, people's sense of self, the gap that was left has been filled by the marketers who came in and said, "Don't worry if you don't know who you are. We will provide you with a packaged identity which you can use, by buying our products of course, to create a sense of self which you can then project onto the world."
Around the world, sales of blue contact lenses are escalating, and more people are using chemicals to lighten their skin and hair.
不一样，它比较有品味，比较时尚，在穿衣服方面就比较很随便，但是在吃的方面，什么说做事的方面就跟中国人不一样。我经常拿美国人和中国人进行比较，我就比较敬佩美国人。
Encouraging consumerism threatens the ecological fabric of the entire planet. Natural resources are already stretched to breaking point by population pressures. And yet we have an economic system that encourages each and every one of us to consume more and more and more.
The moment a person moves into the city, the energy use shoots up, the water use shoots up. The infrastructure to run a city per capita is much bigger than the infrastructure to produce a high quality of life in a village.
When hundreds of millions of rural people are pulled into cities, the food they once grew themselves must now be grown for them on giant chemical-intensive farms. All this food must then be brought into the cities on roads purpose-built to accommodate larger and larger trucks. Providing water involves enormous dams and man-made reservoirs. Energy production means huge centralized power plants, coal and uranium mines, and thousands of miles of transmission lines. Meanwhile, much of the waste that is produced, including countless tons of potentially valuable compost, must be trucked out of the city to be treated, buried, incinerated, or dumped at sea.
Economic growth means strength and vitality.
Not only our economies, but our societies, our political systems, the entire culture is focused on making sure that our GDP grows as fast as possible.
And I stand for programs that will mean growth and progress.
It's as if every problem we have can be solved by increasing GDP.
Economic growth is the key to the future of this country.
Poverty is the problem, more economic growth is the answer. Unemployment is the problem, more economic growth is the answer. Environmental decline is the problem, more economic growth is the answer.
A fiscal stimulus plan that will jumpstart economic growth is long overdue.
Using GDP as a measure of societal progress is little short of madness. If there's an oil spill, GDP goes up. If the water is so polluted we have to buy it in bottles, GDP goes up. War, cancer, epidemic illnesses, all of these things involve an exchange of money, and that means that they end up on the positive side of the balance sheet.
In 1972, the then King of Bhutan coined the term gross national happiness and embedded the concept in the country's development policy. Following his lead, economists across the world have begun to develop more meaningful ways of measuring well-being and prosperity. One such measure is the GPI, or Genuine Progress Index.
The purpose of the Genuine Progress Index is to count things more accurately, more comprehensively, to take into account our human, social, community, natural wealth, in addition to our produced and material wealth, and actually count full social and environmental and economic benefits and costs. Only with a full cost accounting system will we begin to understand that goods that are shipped from 10,000 miles away are actually far more expensive than goods produced locally.
If you look at the current system, we're seeing the distance between production and consumption continue to increase. We're seeing the distance between people and power continue to increase. I think economic globalization is responsible for that. It's increasing those trends, and the obvious answer for me is the opposite, and that is economic localization.
We've got to begin localizing our politics, localizing our economies, localizing our cultures, localizing our spirits, even our spiritual natures.
There is only one economics that will make sense. It is local economics, everywhere.